Hi, and I'm here with our guest today, Jason Coyle, who's the president of the Chicago Sports Network and a longtime colleague. Welcome to the show.
It's, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for reaching out. It's great seeing you again.
Yeah, no, this is it's terrific. Jason and I crossed paths many, many years ago, but we'll get into that and as he talks about his past. But so you've launched a new regional sports network in Chicago. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what your job is and what you're doing these days?
Yeah, we launched the Chicago Sports Network on October 1st at 5 p.m. Central, right to the second, and we are the successor network to Fox Sports Net Chicago, Comcast Sports Net Chicago, and NBC Sports Network Chicago. Most recently, the official home of the Bulls and the Blackhawks and the White Sox. Over 300 live games exclusively per year. But we're looking to build something on top of those exclusive live games to create something more than just a pipeline for delivering those games, something that is definitely specific to Chicago, really leaning into all things Chicago, both in our marketing and from our content, really preserving the editorial values and the production values of our predecessors, but reinventing everything else. And as we go through my steps along the way, I think we'll see little nuggets that we've picked up over the years that all have combined to inform our path ahead here, and it's a pretty exciting one.
Well, it's always interesting in the changing world of the regional sports networks and how it's distributed, et cetera, which we'll get into in a second. But first, as we do on this show on the regular, can you talk a little bit about what your professional path has been to get you to your current position?
Yes, unexpected path here. If I had known this were a job, I would have tried to get it. I had no idea though that I could ever end up here. And I was just, I was raised in an Army family. My dad really on that GI Bill, and he had gone to college and then law school. On that, we moved around the country, and he went into the JAG Corps and became a judge in the Army. And boy, I'll tell you what, there's nothing like being a little kid sitting in the back of the courtroom, and there's your dad with the flag behind him in charge. And I just was absolutely taken. And that was the only thing I ever wanted to be. Everything at home was about dad, dad's job and sports. Mom was a huge sports fan. Dad was a huge sports fan. And so it all started there. And I really only had the singular mind to go into law. And I'm still happy that I did. Dad was a prosecutor and then a litigator. So naturally I followed, I followed in his footsteps on the litigation side.
Well, which I always like to talk about, especially for the young lawyers tuning in who, want to have a job like what I did at Fox Sports for so many years and the kind of stuff you're doing now. But I like to tell people that young lawyers listen. Litigation experience makes you a much better transactional lawyer. And I think there's a lot of truth in that statement.
Well, you don't see a lot of us on this side of the business who have successfully transitioned in. Sometimes wish I had been a deal lawyer. I had to learn all of that later, but those litigation skills have been fantastic along the way. I still use them. Everything when you're trying to convince a judge, a panel, an arbitrator, a jury, it's the same thing as trying to convince an audience and to entertain. You've just got to hit them up front, tell a story, and make sure that you pay it off. And it really comes into play in writing scripts and developing shows and evaluating content, almost everything that we do.
So, how did you get from litigation into the transactional world? And was our friend Charlie Besser's Intersport your first stop?
It was the first stop into sports, and I'm grateful for it. Yeah, I had moved to Chicago back when it was Fox Sports Net Chicago in the mid late '90s, and I was a litigator at Sidley and Austin. I came in, I didn't know what I didn't know, and I barely knew anything about anything. I was alone in the city. I was new to law. I was new to Chicago. I'd been, moving around these small towns, with our family, settling in Michigan. And man, I got to Chicago, and my eyes just were opened and excited. And so I went and spent almost 3 years at Sidley, really just absorbing everything that they would let me do. Depositions. I was staffed on a federal jury trial that went to the verdict. We won. I was second chair. I'm not going to take credit for that one, but I did get some reps. Arbitrations, really amazing experience. I couldn't have been more grateful to my colleagues and bosses at Sidley. But it did occur to me that the subject matter was a little hit or miss. I was staffed on various reinsurance claims that had been 6-7 years in the making by the time I touched them, and after I left, they settled like 2 or 3 years later. And I would go from reinsurance to commercial dispute here and there, and in some ways that was extremely interesting. But I'm not a subject matter expert at any of those. Yeah, that's the nature of litigation. The only thing I ever knew for sure was sports. The only thing I knew I loved was sports. And I had this opportunity through Charlie Besser, reached out. He was formerly at Sidley, had a great relationship, and he offered me a position as counsel, but also with the opportunity to try to develop some shows and oversee the very small department. I'm sure he had very low expectations. I hope he did, because I could barely find my way to the edit room. But that was really the start. And Intersport was at a formative time, really, really good people, really great relationships, and an amazing opportunity for me to get into it. And I could go into more of what we did there, depending if you'd like, because it really did set me on the course to where I am now.
Well, I think everybody has to have that moment when they get their foot in the door in the sports industry in one way or another. But I think you were lucky because you went to work for what I would describe as a very entrepreneurial guy,
Yeah.
and created a lot of content and got a lot of distribution in that content. And I think that's a great way to get into the sports business, is actually the delivery of that content.
I'd agree. It taught us so much because we had essentially Intersport, certainly at the time, we were, I guess the way you put it is the best, entrepreneurial. And we were looking to do business with networks, do business with brands, try to really deliver brand value, while spending as little as we can to try to create that margin on every single property. So we were doing time buys, a lot of live events when we first met each other: college football all-star challenge, slam dunk and three-point championships, women's basketball events years ago before they were cool. But then we would get into documentaries, several Sports Century documentaries, the predecessor to 30 for 30. Originals, we came up with an all access concept called The Season that ran for years and years. It was really the first ever. And along the way, we were constantly looking to push the content, to over deliver for brands beyond the commercial value, really bring them inside the shows. And that led us eventually, over the course of over a decade there, from television, where we were fortunate to be as the only packager on Fox, NBC, CBS, ESPN, even Speed Channel. Anywhere there was a sports network, we were on. But it did grow a little tiring, constantly asking for a time period, begging for promotion, trying to keep the time value fees down. And so we wanted to start our own platform, and that's digital was just coming on. And we really leaned in. We started a couple of made for digital businesses and eventually sold a major deal to, at the time, a major player, Sprint Exclusive Entertainment. And we did an 8-figure deal and set up a full-time made for mobile studio operation. And that was kind of setting the course for, my next phase.
And your next phase was?
Well, yeah, we had gone a long time together. So many great people at Intersport, and I felt like everything was in a really, really good place. And I got a call from a college friend of mine, Brooks Boyer, who had worked at the Bulls and had just gone over to run marketing and the business side for Jerry Reinsdorf at the White Sox. And they were interested in starting a new company with a focus on building the next generation of sports video content, post linear sports networks. And this was very, 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 very early in this, but we had just seen the success, at Intersport. I had such a great friendship with Brooks and such an amazing reverence and respect for Jerry that it was just an offer that I was so excited to accept. So we went over there and got a non compete. We honored that for a year. I ended up partnering with the VP of wireless data from Sprint, who was my client on that prior deal, and we really started the company with Brooks. Consulted, really learned what was in the marketplace, started looking at mobile digital television, started looking at syndicating content across various digital outlets, creating cost effective but high quality content. And so over the course of years, we managed to combine our relationships that we had built over the prior decade with everything that we'd come to learn on digital. So we started the ACC Digital Network. Then we started Campus Insiders in partnership with IMG College. That was their exclusive video operation. And together we were the first to ever bring original, primary, exclusive college rights to digital. West Coast Conference when Jamie Zaninovich was there. Gonzaga basketball, having it on digital with television production values was really exciting. The Atlantic 10, Mountain West Conference, Patriot League. By the time we were done, we had 1,000 events per year. Men's and women's basketball, field hockey, volleyball, a lot of the things that we see breaking out now, we could see had legs way back then, and so that was really our first wave there. And then we got an opportunity to work with the professional leagues. Bob Bowman at MLBAM, the NHL, PGA Tour. I just texted with a friend of mine there, Chris Wandell, yesterday, and Sports Illustrated. And some really noteworthy people coming out of that business. Jim DiLorenzo was at SI at the time. Just an all-star lineup of people involved. And the premise, we're taking a lot of what we did there to the Chicago Sports Network. 120 Sports was a mobile-only, live, interactive media operation. So we were live 8 to 12 hours per day, 120 seconds at a time, hence the name. And it was a mobile-only live interactive business. So every 120 seconds, we would switch from topic to topic, sport to sport, and every video segment would be supplemented with what we call data cards, supplemental. Could be statistical information, it could be commercial opportunities, but what was really, really important and what we're carrying forward is an opportunity for the fans, if they had signed in, to ask questions in real time to our talent who were holding iPads, and really created this operation where fans could come inside of what we were doing. And it was really, really special. It was really, really early, but it was really special. Apple, out of the blue, I remember that day sitting in my office, called me and said, "Hey, you're one of the top 24 apps of this year. You've just been selected." I still don't know why there were 24 on that list instead of some other number, but I was very grateful. And so, yeah, that was really what we were doing in our early days, and kind of sowed the seeds of where we are now.
Well, what's interesting is I think you've just laid out a really terrific timeline for the business that in 20, 25 years, we've gone from an analog linear distribution, traditional television model to a pure digital universe of streaming content, of different platform deliveries, and yet people still want sports. It's just we live in a world now where it can be delivered differently than it was just 20 years ago. So I think those changes are key to the growth of sports, because when you look at television ratings, for example, what 94, 95 of the top 100 shows are sports, and there's an appetite for that. So I think it's really interesting that you've sort of developed your career on the common path of the change in the distribution model, which leads me to my next question, which is that for years the regional sports network model was a huge cash cow, and that was in part due to, I think, the ability of the networks, particularly the Foxes and the ESPNs, ABC, ESPNs, to bundle their product, get it in cable packages. But that model has changed, and yet it seems to me that the appetite for the local sports fan has not changed. Perhaps it's even grown. How are you now dealing with getting that delivery to your consumer?
Yeah, the appetite hasn't changed. The usage patterns and the ecosystem sure has. And we we are essentially leaning into every single thing we learned along the way here. We still have a giant marketplace to reach, but when you started out at Intersport, and even just 10, 12 years ago, there were 110 million cable homes, as you probably remember well. Times were good. Times were good. And those times really rewarded delivery of the games. And the cable customer was happy enough to pay, the provider was happy enough to pay the networks. And really, it was all around the delivery of those games. And that was primary. And over time, it went from primary to exclusively. I think, and I think over time, what we saw is those costs that had to continue to rise as the cost of putting players on the field rose. It also drove the networks to need more from their distribution partners, which then was passed along to the consumer, and that put pressure on the cable bundle. And really, fast forward to today, we're down to 50 million cable subscribers, and we have to find a way to deliver our content to the fans wherever they want to watch. And that's one of the primary the primary intentions of the Chicago Sports Network, and one of the most important things to we think finding a sturdy and prevailing business model, and that comes first to just making it available on whatever platform, and I'll add at whatever price point is right for the consumer, because as cable has become rarer, the costs just keep going up. And we know in Chicago, for instance, 3.5 million households, 600,000 households in Chicago are watching TV primarily via free-to-air broadcast with a digital antenna, which was implausible 20 years ago, just nuts.
Yeah.
But now 600,000 homes in HD, and those were households and sports fans who were just never going to watch cable again. So we have to make it available to them there. Meanwhile, we understand that we still have a lot of customers at the satellite level with DirecTV, at the basic cable level, and then the virtuals, the streaming distribution partners have come on as well. And throw in, just to make sure we're not missing anybody, a direct-to-consumer product. And so really, when you look at it, you have to know every single way to reach fans, because they're now all in play. And how do you create those elite production values with enough flexibility in the business model to make it available to fans and be fair and valuable to your business partners along the way? So that was step one in our approach of really breaking out of a model that proved to be at its end, as the economics of Diamond are well reported. I'm sure you've covered it in their entirety, but it made no sense 6 months ago to launch an authenticated only business. The numbers just weren't there, and I feel really good about where we're going.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And for people that aren't in the know of the media business, I think we can give a little background, which was 20 odd, 25 years ago, 20, 25 years ago, whatever, not that long ago. It's you got rights to a sport and you had one place to put it. You were either the free over the air with the right to sign retransmission deals with the cable providers. Well, that was it. And then, you get in the mid uh, 2000s, the teens, and all of a sudden there's pressure from the RSNs to the leagues, where at least the NHL and the NBA listened and said, well, if we have an authenticated MVPD subscriber, why can't they watch it on their computer so long as they're authenticated? And that was the closest to streaming that the leagues would allow. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think all the leagues, they want their viewers and they're more open and have become more open, with the possible exception of Major League Baseball, have become more open to allowing the distributors to use whatever means are possible to reach their audience, which is why I was so interested when I read about the launch of what you guys were doing, because you came at it from a totally different approach than any RSN that I've ever heard of.
Yeah, we're the first, and we're going to do our work, and we will not be the only. I think this is a really, really, really important model with it's going to take a lot of work and time and patience, and really introducing some new user habits. But I really believe in this model, and that is to absolutely maximize availability and to be ubiquitous in the distribution, and that includes with the free to air, watching via an antenna all the way down to a mobile only direct to consumer product and everything in between. But what was as important to the model, once we reach fans, we have to do better than we have. And one of the things that really happened with the RSNs over the course of time, no one's fault, all rational decisions, a lot of good people involved, but the regional sports networks had become multi-regional corporate operations where there was really nothing local except the games. The daytime programming was the same for everyone. The graphics package was the same for everybody. The sets, depending on which company you were with, were the exact same for everybody. And I think that was all laid bare when COVID hit. And, there's not a lot to grab onto there when the games aren't available all of a sudden. And we learned from that. We went back to the basics. First, we're not a multi-regional operation. We're the Chicago Sports Network. Chicago is first, and it's primary in everything that we're doing. So that starts with giving fans in Chicago something to watch all day long. That's just for us, just for them. So we created, we're syndicating the number one radio sports talk show in market Monday through Friday. Then we've got a full schedule, including a Chicago only sports center, if you will, that then leads into our pregame show, our games, and our post. But then we're also have brought in-house an experiential marketing business. So rather than just say, oh, here's a pregame show, well, how do we make that better? How do we make it really special? Our set and studio are right downstairs by the Jordan statue. We've opened up the wall to the studio to create a college game day style of experience where the fans can really mesh, and we even invite many of them onto the set. So afterwards they get their pictures taken, get autographs, really create an experience. But equally important, and maybe even more so, is the second screen experience that goes back to our learnings from 120 Sports. We brought Rob Shaw over from after a decade at Meta, where he was really running sports across the world, really understanding how to reach communities of sports fans, really what a great product experience is. And we're going back to everything that we had learned at 120 Sports, and we see where all the rights are heading, and that's to the Amazons and Apples of the world, because their economics are better. They have the media math. and then they have a phone number, an email address, credit card. There's a lifetime value to the user that is much more valuable than just a fleeting M and a CPM calculation. And so with our second screen companion, we're incentivizing fans to come out of anonymity, come out of the Nielsen data banks and share a phone number, share an email address. And in exchange, we're providing them all sorts of chat features, social features, opportunities for a rewards ecosystem that we'll be rolling out, actually thanking our fans and giving back to our customers, like every other business in the world except sports. And then along the way, by doing that, we've created a better experience. We've created a thank you, putting prizes in their hands, rewarding them for watching, and we've got a direct relationship with them now that helps us program better, provides more value for our sponsors, and just a better experience overall for the sports fan.
Yeah, it's really interesting because for years the negotiations on distribution were already about exclusivity. We'll pay this money because we're going to be the only place you get to see it. But I think we're finally at that flexion point where the powers that be realize people just consume content significantly different than they did 15, 20 years ago. And so you have to be able to deliver it in all the ways possible. And I think that's where we're headed. Clearly, we used to talk about the second screen experience being watching the game on TV and I have my laptop open and I can look at stats and whatnot. And I think we've seen with all the players is like you can have that second screen experience on the first screen and engage your audience differently because our audiences in sports media are very different than they've ever been. And a big part of that is because of gambling. Gambling and fantasy, I think, have changed the way we deliver content and serves our audience because our audience wants this information for other uses than just casually watching the game. Are you finding, that to be true with what you guys are doing?
It may prove to be true. We're not there. We're not there yet. We're trying first to establish just a better, more fundamental fan experience that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with gambling. And it has a lot more to do with social media and just that expectation and the connection that fans have to be able to comment. And our second screen companion is actually live synced to the big screen. So we have a software layer that sits in the production truck, that sits in our control rooms, and that sits on the handset. So once a fan, for free on the freemium part of our app, shares an email address, shares a phone number, that fan is enabled the opportunity to chat, to contribute, captions, to send us information, and a very basic experience, but I'll give you a sense of it is on the big screen, we'll ask a poll. Is player A going to win? Player of the game is player B. And on your handset, you can vote for A or B. And then on the big screen, you'll see the rolled up summary data and the results in real time. And it's exciting. And once we start to establish those relationships and that cross screen behavior, we can start to introduce carefully so we don't interfere with it with a lean back game experience, which will always be primary. But then we can start to introduce contextual commerce, really fun opportunities for the fans that is completely voluntary, whether they transact or not, but gives us an opportunity to have that relationship and to introduce revenue streams that are going to be important as the traditional legacy revenue streams wane.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear you speaking so much about your consumer, your audience, your member of your community, because it seems that you're finally realizing, which I think a lot of regional sports networks paid lip service to but never really addressed, was that the community of your audience, of your local sports fans. And you've just laid out this great blueprint for how you engage with them, how you find them, how you make them feel a part of your production, which to my mind's eye is where the concept of a regional sports network has to go today, because that's how the consumer needs to to be engaged by actually being engaged and feeling they're a part of the production. So kudos to you folks.
Well, thank you. We're first, we are so lucky to be in Chicago. I mean, we have the great fan bases. We have great neighborhoods. We have 77 of them. And that was part of why we made it available free to air. Every one of those 77 neighborhoods needs to have access and needs to understand that they have representation in this sports network. It's not just for those fans who are buying the highest tier of of whatever cable providers out there. This is for everybody. And our persona for the Chicago Sports Network is we're a citizen of Chicago. And we almost look at this like a public trust in a way. We want this, the fans feel it when we lose or win. We want them to understand that we understand that we know that they're a part of this, and without them, there's nothing for us. And when we say citizen of Chicago, we market in Chicago. The brand is out marketing, sponsoring skating rinks all across the city, sponsoring little league teams, supporting the local business community, and especially in the West and South Side neighborhoods where we operate our venues. And traditionally, those businesses have faced a tougher time than the downtown establishment. So the first network spot that ever aired was one that we went out and identified a South Side business, very successful entrepreneur, but probably had never been on air before. So we went in there with our original content production operation, produced with them a great 30-second commercial, and then we donated the airtime. And we've got 6 of those now, all really cool, interesting businesses from across Chicago, keeping it local, supporting our entrepreneurs, while not losing sight of the multinationals who also work here. But it's important for us, for fans to understand that this isn't if you know, you know. We are not flying over here. We live here. This is for you. This is from us for you, because we're fans too.
Jason, look, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. I'm so excited for what the future of the Chicago Sports Network is going to be. But just in the little chat we've had today, you've made it very clear that regional sports networks can work. I think you've got the right formula and you're on the right track. So keeping my fingers crossed for you guys. I think it's a really great opportunity you've created, not just in the media space, but for the Chicago sports fans. So tip of the hat to you.
Thank you, Bobby. I really appreciate it. Tip of the hat to you for all your successes. And, it's still a great colleague after all these years. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And everyone, Sports Lawyers Association members, we're annual membership. It's almost the end of the year. Time to renew your membership. Go to sportslaw.org and renew your membership to the SLA. And we'll see you in Nashville in May for our annual conference. Jason, thanks again for taking the time. Great seeing you. Great catching up a little bit. And you guys are on the right path. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Take care.
Thank you.